Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, here with the most wonderful time of year, the Steam Winter Sale. As always, we're looking at strategic and tactical games ranging from 4X to GSG to city building and more, and if you have any recommendations of your own, feel free to drop them in the comments below. If you find this video helpful in picking out some deals, consider hitting the like button, but first, with timestamps down below, let's begin. Age of Wonders 4 is currently 30% off, available for just $40, and it's an excellent turn-based 4X game with the Age of Wonders series returning to its more fantastical side after dipping its toes in sci-fi with Planetfall. Not only will you build your empire on the turn-based strategic map, establishing cities, expanding territory, building structures, and recruiting units, but you'll assemble armies and battle with them in turn-based, hex-based tactical combat as well. This combination is something I've always loved, whether in real-time or turn-based, and faction and realm creation here are quite open-ended as well, keeping replayability at a maximum. Different realm traits can fundamentally change how the game plays based on the map that gets generated for a playthrough, and in some cases, you can introduce entirely new win conditions among the existing handful that are each a little different in their own ways. Faction creation is a blast as well, with different forms from humans to rats to moles, different cultures, different societal traits, and more to determine what kinds of special abilities and buildings and units and playstyles are best for your campaign. And I'm a big fan of the tome system, which unlocks new units, buildings, and spells to use in battle and on the campaign map as you progress through the metaphorical tech tree. Among these spells are summons for epic units and ways in which to modify your own species to strengthen them in various ways, like imbuing them with certain innate capabilities. The storyteller in me absolutely loves these decisions and options, and once you mix all that in with the random events, a competent AI, and beautiful visuals, you've got yourself an excellent game well worth its full price tag. DLC has added new options across faction and realm creation as well, introducing new variables, but free updates to the base game since launch have kept things interesting too. This is one of my favorite games of the year, and at this price tag, it's a must-buy. Battle Brothers is currently 50% off, available for just $17, and there's a reason you'll see me recommend this game at least once a year. A bit of a definitive game, this one, considering it's inspired many like it since its release. You lead a band of mercenaries in a randomly generated fantasy world, traveling from town to town, taking on quests, balancing relationships between factions, managing a huge variety of equipment and broad skill trees, and of course, engaging in turn-based tactical battles that take no prisoners. The challenge of the game is a big part of its appeal, alongside the pleasant surprises in complexity. There's nothing like coming across fresh mechanics from an enemy you've never seen before, trying to figure out new ways to tackle them and suffering the consequences of your errors as you do so. There's a mix of minor and major things here, mind you, like how stabbing a skeleton is less effective than bludgeoning one, but also how some enemies will eat your brother's whole, or how some are best fought in the nude. There's all kinds of interesting twists and turns here, and even though many sandbox mercenary company RPGs have come since, Battle Brothers remains the best, hands down. The devs are currently working on a sci-fi sequel, but there's plenty of DLC worth picking up here too, and there are hundreds of hours of gameplay to be had. If you haven't already picked up Battle Brothers, now is as good a time as any. Desynced is 20% off, available for just $30, and if you're looking for a factory game that tries something a little different, I can definitely recommend checking out Desynced. You find yourself stranded on a randomly generated alien planet with a simple objective: acquire enough resources to repair your ship out in orbit, and then leave. Unfortunately, things aren't so simple, as the planet is infested with rather territorial aliens, and acquiring the resources you need involves engaging with both them and an entire series of production chains. Fortunately, doing both is a fun experience. There are a lot of familiar aspects of factory games here. You're harvesting resources from the planet, processing them into more complex ones, and then using those to make even more complex ones. And of course, automation plays a big part of it. That's where things start to get really interesting, as you're able to automate things using both simple and complex programming methods, using a node-based interface to direct the flow of resources, the currently active manufacturing tools attached to buildings and units, and what exactly they're supposed to be manufacturing. You can also use a multitude of variables and conditional statements to impact behavior based on, say, availability of raw materials, presence of hostile units, proximity of resources, etc., etc., and what's more, The modular nature of units and buildings means that you can spend a fair bit of time optimizing not just your production chains, but the very buildings and units performing the steps on said chain. Desynced is a very interesting concept and well worth checking out. IXION is currently 43% off, bringing its price down to about $25, and this is one of the most fascinating survival colony management games I've played mechanically and narratively speaking in recent years. Without spoiling too much of the story, full of unexpected twists and turns as it is, you play as the head honcho aboard a station that is meant to seek out a new home for humanity. Life on Earth is no longer sustainable, but there is hope in the distance, and you must traverse across multiple star systems to seek it out. As you do so, you'll come across a variety of threats and anomalies, forcing you to investigate the mysteries of the universe and to pull back the shroud that covers some of the finer details of your mission too. You'll gather resources with the help of mining and science ships, you'll process them into usable materials with which to construct additional structures or research new technologies, and you'll have to worry about the supply of housing, water, food, entertainment, and much more besides across multiple independently operating sectors as you manage worker and non-worker populations aboard the station. Their happiness staves off mutiny, and their ability to work efficiently will determine your chances of survival. The game has seen many improvements since launch, and if you're interested in an interstellar narrative experience with top-notch writing, excellent music, and fun colony management mechanics to go along with it all, IXION is well worth your time and money. Foundation is currently 20% off, available for just $30, and boy has this city builder come a very, very long way since it was first launched into early access. With some really great concepts around organic city building and modular construction of wonders and castles alike, Foundation feels like a very fresh take on the medieval city building genre, as it very aggressively tosses aside the overly planned urbanization of the modern era that many games force upon a time that in many ways relied on a more haphazard approach. A huge selection of resources spread across a massive variety of buildings and their associated production chains give you plenty to explore as you look after the needs of your citizens and the demands of various factions assigning you missions from time to time. Foundation will leave you with some very unique cities as your citizens use the path of least resistance to get from place to place, asking you to really consider what's known as desire paths to build your city. You get very clear and immediate indicators of how your citizens are going about their day-to-day lives, adding another layer to the usual slew of city building concerns and mechanics. I'm a big fan of this game, and I've been watching it since it came out into early access, and at its current price tag, I can definitely recommend picking it up. Terra Invicta is currently 30% off, available for just $35, and if you're looking for a complex, hard sci-fi game inspired by the likes of The Expanse or The Three-Body Problem, look no further. Terra Invicta starts with the appearance of aliens in the far reaches of the solar system, and you must choose one of several factions to lead, each with their own response to the new arrival. Some want to serve the aliens, others want to eradicate them, others want to just abandon the solar system. What's interesting is that no matter which faction you pick, you start relatively powerless, and the first act of the game involves a lot of geopoliticking. Use agents and all manner of operations to convince nations to join your faction in an effort to gain access to their resources. Use said resources to conduct research, sometimes in conjunction with the other factions when trying to unlock large buckets of techs, and at other times on your own to unlock the specifics within said buckets. Build ships to launch orbital platforms and to colonize planets in search of more advanced resources, and then establish space facilities for the manufacture and maintenance of warships as you duke it out against alien and human enemy alike across the entirety of the solar system, taking Newtonian physics into account as you plan travel trajectories, slingshot maneuvers, and even the design of your ships. All this while keeping an eye on evolving threats on Earth too. Terra Invicta is a complicated game, not for the faint of heart, and that's where a lot of its criticism stems from. But if you want a great simulation of how humanity will likely deal with an alien threat, this is a great game to sink countless hours into. Empires of the Undergrowth is currently 20% off, available for just $20, and after 6 years in early access, the game is finally slated for release next year. And let me tell you, this is one of the most unique strategy games I've played in a long time. In Empires of the Undergrowth, all the action is taking place in the Insect Kingdom, and you're in charge of the ants. The narrative campaign has two simultaneous approaches. On the one hand, You'll be playing through missions on handcrafted maps with specific mechanics and challenges that demonstrate the capabilities of specific ant species, taking a documentary-style approach to said species, introducing you to various types of enemies, resources, and more. But these serve as missions in which to acquire resources for the other side of the narrative, where you lead a new made-up species of ant, unlocking new abilities as well as the option of having multiple different types of ants within your colony. This storyline puts you in a science experiment that gets zanier and zanier as time goes on, with one of the lead scientists really wanting to test your colony's capabilities out. I talk so much about the setting here because what really makes this game stand out is just how dedicated it is to that setting. You don't simply, for example, left-click and right-click to give orders, instead placing pheromone markers to tell different pheromone groups of ants where to go and how to behave. You don't build buildings to recruit units or generate resources. You establish hatcheries and lay eggs, or otherwise harvest food from various sources, living and dead. It all ties back into the actual functions of the insect world, and it blows my mind how well it all works. My favorite example is probably the level where you have access to an unlimited source of food in the aphids that produce dewdrops on a regular basis. Unfortunately, aphids are food for the ladybugs that show up from time to time, and even though the ladybugs won't attack you, you sure as hell have to attack them if you want to keep the aphids alive and providing you food. That's just one example of many absolutely fascinating and fresh mechanics that have birthed a new interest in ants for me. I can highly recommend giving this one a look, with its completely fresh take on the genre especially. Planet Zoo is currently 70% off, available for just $15, and you've definitely heard me recommend this game before. I've sunk hundreds of hours into it after all. Planet Zoo is a top-notch tycoon game where, across one of 3 modes of play, you build and manage a zoo. You set ticket prices, you set food prices, you hire staff, you ensure guests are having a good time and learning, and above all, you look after the well-being of your animals. There are isolated scenarios you can play through with specific objectives, a sandbox mode that lets you turn off as many mechanics as you'd like, and the franchise mode, which is my personal favorite, allowing you to build however you want, wherever you want, across the world, but with the added layers of financial and performance consideration, and the ability to trade animals and resources between multiple zoos in your franchise, or with others who are also playing in franchise mode. At the heart of the game, though, the big selling points are the level of customization and the level of detail for each and every one of the animals. With regards to the former, this game is from the same folks that brought us Planet Coaster, which means you're really able to design the zoo of your dreams. From guest areas to enclosures, you can go really wild with the building tools and make some absolutely mind-blowing spaces, and what's great to see is that the animals are actually able to engage with these spaces properly. With regards to the latter, that is, the animals, each animal has specific needs, and catering to them is not only expensive, but also a learning opportunity as it reflects real-world information. And it's an absolute joy to engage with besides. These animals are wonderfully modeled and animated, and seeing them interact with your custom-built spaces and each other is just a really cool experience as they hide from rain, fight for dominance, escape through gaps, and play with their toys and environment. Planet Zoo hits a sweet spot, and at this price point, I can highly recommend it. There are so many things to explore in the base game, and then the DLC is there for anybody who wants more animals and more building blocks, though the free updates since launch have added many more features and tools to enjoy too. HUMANKIND is currently 75% off, available for just $15, and though it received a lot of flack at launch, I still think it's a very fresh take on the historical 4X genre, blending turn-based empire management with turn-based tactical combat, a concept I've already mentioned being a fan of earlier in this video. The game has received many updates since its rocky launch, improving aspects such as diplomacy and war, with paid DLC introducing, among other things, additional factions for you to choose from. And therein lies the big differentiator that first piqued my curiosity about HUMANKIND. Rather than choosing to play as a single people from start to finish, you play through multiple eras of human history and choose different cultures from each, mixing and matching their strengths and weaknesses, holding on to the vestiges of prior cultural aspects of your nation, and building a new culture of your own. It's a very realistic, if simplified, representation of how many modern cultures have come to exist through millennia of blending and trading of ideas, and this persists in your choice of civics, religion, and more, as you compete with other cultures for dominance across those fields and the battlefield alike. It leads to some imbalance, as each culture for each era can only be picked once, but this is definitely more of a game for role players, where if you have fun challenging yourself with suboptimal picks in the interest of a good story, you'll have a much better time. Combat is very cool here too, as rather than transport you to a zoomed-in battle map, you fight directly on the campaign map, taking terrain bonuses and penalties into account, with the battlefield growing as advanced technology allows for longer-range combat, and sometimes with battles lasting multiple campaign turns if enough units are involved. If you skipped out on Humankind at full price, it's well worth considering on sale, especially at this massive discount. Anno 1800 is currently 76% off, available for just $20, and this remains one of my favorite city builders because of the sheer complexity of its supply and production chains alone, with the beautiful visuals, the setting, and the ability to war on the high seas being the icing on top. Grid-based city building where finding the perfect layouts for maximum optimization isn't for everyone, but if it's the kind of thing you enjoy, Anno 1800 is a must-buy. Set during the 1800s, you can either play the single-player narrative campaign, skirmish mode against the AI, or multiplayer against friends as you compete to build an industrial powerhouse to rival all others. You progress through this era of technological change with higher levels of citizens having more and more needs and desires, which is par for the course, but sometimes these newly acquired demands require you to entirely revisit your production capabilities or force you to colonize other islands or even the New World to gain access to resources that are unavailable locally. This naturally escalates into building and managing a fleet of ships to transport goods and a support fleet to protect them against pirates and rival entrepreneurs. And I do mean quite literally that you'll be gathering the resources for and then manufacturing these ships of trade and war. You'll also hire explorers to sail out and engage with perilous journeys in search of exotic goods, artifacts, and animals to bring back and put on display in your city museums and zoos to encourage tourism. There are a lot of different moving parts in Anno 1800, and each one is fun to engage with. I highly recommend grabbing this one, especially on sale. If you found something you liked here, consider hitting the like button, and feel free to let me know your own top picks in the comments down below. I'll have a follow-up video with even bigger discounts out soon, but until then, I hope the winter sale treats you and your wallet well. For more strategy, sim, and city building news, previews, let's plays, and more, don't hesitate to subscribe. And as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big ol' thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.